Hi, my name's Tadhg. I'm a freelance game designer, game design consultant. I have been in the video games industry for about 15 years and worked in other kinds of games before that for about 8-9 years. I write for TechCrunch. I write a blog called What Games Are, and I'm writing a book all about game design. So the first game I ever remember really playing and being very inspired by was The Hobbit, which was the original sort of text-stroke-graphic adventure that appeared on the Sinclair Spectrum in 1984 or 5. It's the first game I remember really sort of becoming very engaged in the world of the game with, and sort of finding, if you like, the fiction, the story, all that kind of stuff, just super engrossing. And also, it was interesting for me because I played the game before I ever actually read the books or even heard of Tolkien or that kind of thing, because I was only 9. And so when I actually came around to reading the book sometimes later, I had this kind of weird sensation where the game felt like the more legitimate version and the book felt a bit like as though it was a kind of a strange recording or a take on kind of what the original, or if you like, sort of was supposed to be. So I didn't study games in college at all. I, however, encountered games a lot through the sort of peripheral scene, if you like, through my university. I had 2 attempts to get a university degree. The first one I failed very badly was when I attempted to study to become an engineer, and it turned out I just wasn't very good at that sort of thing. But the second one was when I went back about 2 years later and I studied the arts. So I studied English and history and some psychology, and obtained a degree. And sort of all through that time period, I was very involved in the tabletop gaming scene in Dublin. I was very involved in running things like conventions. I also worked in a video game store for years, so I was kind of playing a lot of games, if you like, for free, getting to just get my hands on sort of everything without actually having to sort of spend money on it and stuff like that. And so my education was a bit, from a games perspective, was kind of a bit of a mixed bag, really. I mean, looking back on it, it wasn't like intended to be that way, but I ended up sort of touching on a whole lot of different areas all through my 20s. And as a designer today, I use influences from all across the board on those kinds of things to make games. So after I graduated from university finally, I went to work for a web design agency for about a year, which made a lot of they developed a lot of computer-based training software. So you'd have a lot of like writing scripts for and designing interactions for this kind of fairly limited kind of environment. And then from there, I got a job working for Tadhg, the middleware company, as a sort of a technical writer. And so I worked on I wrote a lot of their manuals and all that kind of stuff. In retrospect, I was quite bad at it, but it was a lot of my introduction, if you like, to the formal side of the industry came from working at Tadhg and just kind of learning all about like what was GDC, for instance, and all this kind of stuff. I then moved to London, and with the intent of, I wasn't quite sure, like maybe being a journalist, maybe being a writer, something. And I think a friend encouraged me to apply to a couple of video game companies there, because he said, like, well, you've got all this experience, like maybe you'd actually be able to be like a designer, and that's basically your dream job. And I said, yes, it is, but I didn't really believe him, but I decided I'd sort of try anyway. And he was right. I got a interview via a recruiter called Aardvark Swift for a company called Asylum Entertainment, and within about a week was suddenly hired as a games designer working on a licensed PS2 platform game called Galador. And that was my start. Like I got in and I was there for about a year, and then moved on to, I worked at Lionhead for a few years after that. I worked at a company called Climax for about a year, I think, after that, and then sort of just moved kind of on and up through, you know, the chain, so to speak. So recently I worked a lot doing developer relations for Ouya, where I was working with a lot of indie developers and trying to, if you like, help make their games work for the platform, solve a lot of their issues, give design feedback, all that kind of stuff. I worked with the guys who are making the game That Dragon Cancer, for instance, which is super interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing it kind of come out, and I think everybody should, if they get a chance, should play it. Prior to that, I've worked for quite a lot of startup kind of companies in the last few years. I've been a consultant type of guy for a while, and so a lot of my work would be a little bit under NDA, so I can't like talk about it, unfortunately, but just lots of different things. I've worked in like mobile games, tablet games, Facebook stuff, some more kind of normal video game stuff as well, and that kind of thing. My personal work, though, I guess, my writing has become a lot of my sort of personal work. So through my site and through the book that I'm writing, that's the kind of stuff that I find is very much drawing my enthusiasm at the moment. And so I'm very excited to get my book finished this year, hopefully get it out published, have everybody read it and say, yay, wow, that's really cool, or I totally hate that. But at least, you know, it's kind of, it feels like a good contribution. So I think it's a really interesting time in games at the moment. I mean, it's always an interesting time in games, but especially so because a lot of the technical surge that's happened over the last 5 years, different platforms, different paradigms of play, feels like that's kind of settled down to a large extent. We know what a mobile game is now, we know what a tablet game is now, we know what a Steam game is, and we know what a console game is, and all of those kinds of different chunks, if you like, sort of are becoming quite steady. There's some excitement that people have for things like virtual reality sets, but to me it feels like it's maybe a little young to sort of really know what that's going to be just yet. But it's more the culture of games, the art of games, the expansion of the player types on the one hand, the expansion of the kinds of themes of games, particularly in the indie space, like what's going on with all of their the experimentation in that space. That for me that's kind of where the future is to be found.